Good morning, everybody. So sorry about the mix-up last week. I really felt terrible about not being with you, but I'm so glad there's an opportunity this morning to talk about hope, which is one of my favorite words and one of my favorite concepts. I know I've met many of you, some of you more than others, but just a brief introduction. My husband Evan and I came to WCC on the day of the Christmas pageant in 2021. We were doing some church shopping and we didn't go anywhere else, and then we just kept coming back. So you may have seen my two little boys, one's 14, one's 11, Finn and Wyatt. So we are so grateful for this church and so many beautiful friendships and relationships that we've built here, and it just really means a lot to us and our family. So thank you, Greg and Jessica, for asking me to talk about hope today. And I sort of divided my talk into three parts, and the first part is a little bit about some definitions of the word hope. The second part is a little bit of like some personal thoughts on my experience with the word, and that to me it's like a concept more than a word. And then the last part is something that I found from someone, I felt like you might have read her, Jen Butler. You know her? She's like a progressive theologian, and she had this amazing essay. So I don't want to take credit for what I'm going to share with you because it's what she wrote. And then I thought maybe we could just have some conversation.
She wrote something recently about why is everybody arguing about gender? Is that
maybe she looks very
familiar.
progressive and contemporary, but yeah, I just found it online and thought it was good. So I hope that sounds good to everyone. So this is a definition that I found that I absolutely loved, and it was, so this was one definition of hope, that hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. Hope is always busy trying to change the odds. And I really loved that definition because to me, hope is such an action verb. And when I was reflecting on this topic, I think sometimes the word hope gets a bad rap as being kind of wishy-washy, like, let's hope things are different next time, or I really hope it works out. That sometimes it can sound kind of empty and just like, gosh darn, not what I wanted, but maybe it'll be better next time. But to me, hope really is an action word. And so, full disclosure, my parents are both journalists, newspaper writers. And so I had to start with like some definitions from the dictionary and a little bit more about hope, that it's a very action-oriented word. Unlike a state of being, hope implies a desire or expectation for something to happen, which is considered an active process. Kava. Right, kava, exactly. And when used in a sentence, hope functions as a verb that can be conjugated in different tenses. We'll geek out a little there, further indicating its active nature. So I just wanted to share that as a starting point, because again, to me, like when we say that we are hoping at something, to me, that means we are taking an action. And another thing I wanted to share with you, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the work of Brene Brown. So I'm a social worker. Brene Brown is a social worker. Her books have absolutely changed my life. My favorite one is Daring Greatly, but this is a book she wrote called Atlas of the Heart. And the kind of subtitle is Mapping Meaningful Connection and the Language of Human Experience. So she's both a social worker, but also a social science researcher. So in this book, she really attempts to clarify and differentiate a lot of words that we might use interchangeably. So it's kind of like the nerdy side of emotions and feelings. And I just wanted to share a little something she has in here about hope. So she says, hope is a function of struggle. We develop hope not during the easy or comfortable times, but through adversity and discomfort. And I also found that really resonated because, kind of like it's easy to feel good when things are good, right? And it's easy to celebrate when things are going the way that we had hoped they would or wanted them to. Oh, I can't use hope in the definition. Whoops. You know what I'm getting at. But I love that concept that something that is future focused and positive can come out of difficult times. So just some more things that I found. I mean, really, this is like sharing my background knowledge with you more than my personal experience, but this was something that I read from an assistant professor of psychology. Her name is Leah Dickens, and she studies the functions of emotions in everyday life. And this is what she said about hope. Hope is a positive emotion, but when you think about it a little bit further, you realize how much of it is cognitive. Hope is about feeling positive when you think about the future, but it also involves thoughts about how you might get to that future state. And while optimism can be about things that are outside of our control, hope is focused on what is within our control. And some might define hope as an optimistic belief that the goals we want will be attained. So there's some definitions. So that's part one. Part two, I was just, if you will indulge me, I guess, in like a little bit of a personal thought about hope. So I know this is not a church where we talk about having a testimony in the traditional Christian sense, but I feel like I sort of do have a testimony about hope, and I just wanted to share that. And then again, I will get to the Advent part, because what I found by this woman, Jen Butler, was really amazing, and hopefully people will enjoy that.
Well, actually, I'm wondering before you get your personal part, I just
please.
wanna know your personal part.
Oh my God, save me, to interject conversation.
That last definition, I'm kind of wanting us to do like a round robin, like a discussion, so I don't know if you're gonna go there, but
Go.
that
Please
last
take over.
thing about like, is there a time that you can think of in your life where, what was the thing, optimism is outside, but hope is
It's within our control, that's what she wrote, yeah.
I'm telling you in advance, think a little bit about where that might have come up in your life, because maybe we can move to discussion when she's finished with her personal story. Does that sound?
Or we can share now, I'm not.
I don't have one right now.
Okay.
Unless anybody else wants to.
Okay.
Put their hand.
Okay, I'll buy it well sometime.
It's a big question.
So as, I don't know if anyone here's ever had this experience, but when I sat down to work on this talk, it was not coming together. You know, you do your reading and you do your research, but it's like, oh, there's no theme, there's no flow, this is not working. So then I decided, like many things, what I needed to do was close my computer and go to sleep and wake up and work on it in the morning. And I did, and then it came together a little bit differently. So but just what I wanted to share, I mean, I'm being facetious with my testimony, but I do feel like hope, the reason when Greg mentioned what the topics were, I think I said, oh, hope, I want to talk about that, is that I just feel like it's been a central theme in my life and in my faith. So, and I know I've shared this in some different contexts here. So my dad was a Jesuit priest. Well, I mean, kind of like a quitter, because obviously he has 4 children, but he was in the Jesuits, which, you know, as like an Irish Catholic boy growing up on the west side of Chicago, that's the best thing you can do to make your parents proud, right? To become a priest. So that's sort of the background that I grew up with from my dad. I say that on his tombstone, it will say Jesuit and then writer and then father. So that's my dad. And then my mom is more of like a seeker, grew up without a strong faith in her household. Her dad was Catholic, her mom was Presbyterian, but nobody really went to church regularly. But my mom was like that, kind of like what Paolo shared with us in our process a little bit of, he was a seeker and was always looking for that faith, even though that wasn't something that was a big thing for his family. So that was my mom. After my parents got divorced, my mom started taking us to Kenilworth Union Church, and that's the church that I grew up in. And now my mom is a deacon in her church. So that's sort of how I grew up, but like a lot of people, I always believed, but it wasn't until I had my own children and my own family that it became just, I don't know, over time became really, really important to me to have like a faith home for us and to talk about God and talk about spirituality. And I think a lot of that just comes from my own experiences with hope. So just a couple things I wanted to share. You know, my parents were divorced, and it was not, I mean, that's another topic for another day, like we were joking about, we could have a whole series on families, but I think one thing with hope is, so, my parents are both divorced twice, and for me, one act of hope was getting married and having my own family, when I've seen a lot of divorce in my family and a lot of relationships that did not work out. But I've always had so much hope that when I fell in love and was gonna get married, that never made me think that maybe I shouldn't. I just did it anyways. Another, you know, example is I became a social worker because I feel like hope is what we need. I feel like hope is the answer to every problem, and I don't want to live in a world where I can see so much pain and injustice and heartache and sadness and not feel like I need to do my piece to have a solution to that. And that's not to sound like saving the world, which is what people sometimes, I think, maybe think social workers think that we're doing, but to me, that's where like coming back to hope as an action is so important, because if people don't have hope, what do we have, right? When we're living in a situation, like so many of the families I work with, I work at Lurie Children's, and the clinic that I work in is our safety and well-being clinic, and it's children who are physically and sexually abused. And when I know, when I tell people that, they're like, ooh, downer. But I really feel, and maybe again, this is why I love the word hope so much, is I focus on the resilience of these families. And to see, as a colleague of mine says, how this can not be the defining experience for this family and of this child's life, because, you know, when we hear those things, we think, right, that is a game changer in a bad way, right? And of course, it has lots of significant impact on people's lives. But the fact that we get to have this amazing clinic with these amazing child abuse pediatricians who are so caring and compassionate towards these families, is just really, to me, very life-giving and full of hope. So, and some of that, my journey to become a social worker, so I was an English major before I was a social worker, and I'm sure many of you have read the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and that book has had such a profound impact on my life that my older son is named Finnegan Atticus Brown. So, you know, it's like the hope that I found in books, the hope that I found in stories of people who use their one voice to speak up against injustice. Like I wrote about that in my graduate school essay. So that's a little bit about hope. And the last thing I'll share about that, and then I'm sure now I'm taking up plenty of time, don't worry. See, once I get on a roll, you just like, can't stop. Is, you know, actually both of my sons have ADHD, and one has ADHD along with anxiety and some learning challenges. And it requires a lot of hope to raise a child who gets messages pretty much daily that his behavior is not okay, that he's acting in the wrong way, that he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, that he's not like everybody else. And if I did not have hope for his future and for, you know, the future of our educational system, then hopefully we can become more appreciative and understanding of neurodivergency, then it can feel like a very hopeless situation to raise a child like that. So to me, that's just, hope is a huge part of how I parent. And yeah, so those are just some thoughts on hope in my own life. And then I wanted to share with you lastly, before we jump into conversation. So this is an essay I found from Reverend Jen Butler, who again is a very progressive theologian from what I
Faith in
read.
Public Life, that's what.
Okay.
She runs a
Please.
nonprofit called Faith in Public Life, which is basically speaking with a progressive voice to the public issues of our day. And basically, she's the person I wish I was.
That's right. I was like, I know you want some.
We all do.
We are.
I think I've applied to that position, being like, do you need anybody else?
Yeah. Yeah.
We especially need hope right now.
Yes, I know. So this, I thought this was really beautiful what she wrote. So this is just me reading from Jen Butler. These are not original Katie Brown thoughts. Okay. So this is what she wrote about Advent and hope. Hope is the central theme of Advent. In a world often marked by uncertainty, suffering, and brokenness, the season calls us to place our hope in the promises of God. We are reminded that God has not abandoned, but has promised to be with us, Emmanuel, and to one day restore all things. The prophets of the Old Testament spoke of the coming Messiah with great hope. Isaiah in particular is full of prophecies that describe the Messiah as the light in the darkness and the Prince of Peace, who will bring healing and justice to the nations. For the Israelites, these promises were not just for a future event, but were a source of strength and courage in their present circumstances. In our own time, Advent is an invitation to reawaken our hope. We may face personal challenges, sickness, loss, or heartache, or we may look at the world and be disheartened by violence, injustice, and suffering. Yet Advent reminds us that hope is not passive, it is active. It calls us to look towards God's future while living in faith and trust in the present. Hope does not ignore the darkness, but it refuses to be defined by it. To embrace God's gift of hope is to orient our spirit towards God's vision of human flourishing. To envision it, to share that vision with others, and to work to make it a reality even when the odds seem slim. Hope is not a prediction, that things will turn out all right. It has nothing to do with certainty. It is not even a happy feeling. Hope is a door opened by our determination to bend the arc of the universe towards the biblical version of a world free from oppression and exploitation. Hope is the creation of space for something new to unfold.
Wow, gotta get that book. What's it?
Yeah, that is Jen
Jen
Butler's,
Butler.
that was just an essay I found online, but I know she has lots of
If you
books.
send me the link, I will send it to the whole group so that you can read it.
Yeah, I just stumbled upon that and I felt like that was really in line with a lot of our WCC. That's her, that was me. I just
So-
ended with her.
So you're amazing, but there was a lot in what you just said.
I know.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to read it slowly. Yes, yes.
I just want to tell you that at the farmer's market this summer,
Yes.
your son came up and he wrote
Oh.
something, your younger son
Mm.
wrote something like, "You are a wonderful person," and picked it up and gave it to the African-American man across the aisle.
Mm.
That was such a sweet thing for him to do.
Thank you for telling me that.
Just want to be sure you know that.
Thank you.
At the farmer's market over there in the parking lot, just. Wow.
Junia, is that a plug for everyone to come and do farmer's market out? Just saying. I can't wait for Megan.
It's such fun. It really
Thank you,
is.
it is fun.
And there are a lot of dogs.
Yes.
I love
Oh,
dogs.
dogs, food, music.
You know,
Yeah.
as long as Junia talked about your younger son, your older son and I have a connection.
Yes.
I sit on the end of the choir stall,
Yes.
and when he gives the scripture or whatever, he sits next to me. And once I asked him what his name was, and then it kind of went from there. You know, before church, when we kind of were in our places, but nothing has started
Yeah.
yet. And I admire him very much. I think he's a wonderful person.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's very kind. We're so grateful to be here where they are. No.
So does anyone, anything they want to share that resonates from the wonderful things, the many wonderful things that Katie laid out before us? I have one, I'll start, if anybody else wants to think some more. I have terrible glasses that I can't see through them anymore. When you said the thing about, I wanted to ask you, how do you find hope at knowing a little bit about the world of social work, not really enough that I have been there, but, I think it's probably 50-50, you know, it's like one of those things where you're hoping that there's a day where you have one light spot.
Mm.
There are days, right, where there's no positive. How do you find hope and
I think one is the people I get to work with, because people who work with children who are abused are a bunch of other people who also believe in hope and resilience, or they wouldn't do that, so that lifts me up. I also have a wonderful colleague and then a social work mentor who just says like, everything matters. So if it's, you know, one person who comes and brings their child and, you know, unfortunately, and I promise I won't try to bring us down, but there's a lot of intergenerational repeating of being victims of abuse. So we have a lot of mothers who bring their children to our clinic, and during these appointments, they end up telling us that they too were abused. And that is just so difficult to hear. And what I focus on instead is like, how amazing that you're doing for your child what maybe couldn't have been done for you, breaking the cycle, and let's both go to therapy and connecting them to resources. So I guess I do think it's God-given, because it's not me, because I can do it with other people, but not in my own life, is like immediately redirect to the, isn't it great that we're here together, because this is maybe what we can do now.
So this resonated with me because the year that I did my clinical pastoral education, which is one of the 2 required internships for seminary. One is you work in a church or some other field of ministry. One is clinical pastoral education is about learning pastoral care, and usually it's in a hospital. And the way things worked out, I ended up doing mine with the night ministry. But contrary to, you know, you're familiar with the night ministry, bringing food and probably feeding people at one of the bus stops. When you're a seminarian intern, your job is to go talk to people. It's not feeding, it's not administration, it is relationship and trying to be witness and present to people. I was really scared. Like, I mean, I'm very stoic, so you didn't necessarily see it, but I was internally, I was like, oh my God, what, I had been working up to that point as an organizer. On behalf of people who were poor or, in unjust situations, like without healthcare. For my entire career, but I hadn't really ever worked with poor people. I hadn't worked with homeless people. And I was like, what if someone is, what do I say to them? Where's the connection? What if they're smelly and dirty and, what's that word, lascivious?
Oh, I know what you
How do you
mean.
pronounce that? Lascivious? Or just mentally not right? What if they're aggressive? What if they're mean? I had no idea how I was gonna relate to people. And there's also that fear of, you have a home, you have clothes, you have the ability to buy clothes and buy food and whatever, and you're going to work with people who don't. And that, I think, is more of an internal guilt towards, how do I deal with this when I know I have everything I have? But I found that, the moment of, spending time with people like that actually gave me so much more hope, because it was like grounding, because there's something about, if they can get through it, I can get through it. And sorry to be talking so much. I know you guys have to be quiet. There was something very oddly, like, it was the opposite of what I expected. I expected to feel guilty, I expected to feel uncomfortable, but when you get to know people and they're living in a cardboard box, but they're making it work. They are resilient. I learned in that process, ask them, they're probably they know more about surviving than you do. And you have to surrender your impulse to save and to fix them and just see them as people. And then you start talking to them. And I found more hope in just hanging out with homeless people than I ever thought I would. Because they didn't want anything from me. They just wanted to chat. They wanted to be funny. They wanted to tell some life stories. A few of them told me their, spiritual conversions, looked for a little affirmation. Anyway, so that reminds me of like a little bit about the social work, like you're witnessing some horrible things unfold, but at least you know that you can be one positive. Every impact you have is positive. Try to make it positive, and sometimes it's in that worst brokenness that we find the most hope. I don't know why that is, but I think it's true.
I can resonate that with, it's political, but, just like my country, they had elections yesterday. And the situation is like the current, very similar to what's happening here. The current, president is voted out from the one he overthrew, the party that he overthrew, just like what is happening here. And it's been chaotic. Everybody's thinking, from what you just said, made me think, could we hope that things change? So I ended up writing on Facebook, can we hope as a nation, Ghana? I mean, we are all anticipating. They have their stories, but then again, there's a reason why he's been voted out, so can we hope that things change? So if people can get on the same, maybe things will change.
And the incoming president is a lot like our incoming president?
In a way.
Populist?
So that was the reason why he was voted out.
Yeah.
So for him to come back.
That's good to know. I mean, both, it's an individual action, but it's a societal action too.
Right.
And it's a community building thing to do. Such an amazing word. Thank you, Katie. I mean, how misused is this word? How we just assume it's. I've got to remind myself not to misuse the adverb hopefully, because I don't really mean it when I use it incorrectly. Like, oh, hopefully the Bears will win. Do you mean the Bears will win with hope in their hearts?
Yeah.
You're wishing. But how important is it? It strikes me now, well, because what's the opposite? Hopeless. Hopelessness. So the opposite of this awful chaos and emptiness has to be something we all need, something that's necessary and powerful.
I'm thinking, I could talk for 3 hours probably.
You're a mental health professional.
Yeah, I'm a clinical
I thought
psychologist.
so.
And, but one of the things that I think was probably most moving is something that happened as a result of this church. After I retired. When Ellen Mothershed was here the first time, he really wanted to do a hands-on project. And I'd say I got roped into that. I didn't want to do it. I said the hand of God just took me by the neck and pulled me in, one of those kinds of things. And I got involved with his family. They were living on the west side of Chicago. She was working, she had 3 children at that time. And, they were living in abject poverty. Kids didn't have any beds. They ate on paper plates. They had nothing. And she was working a job as a cook and was really being not well treated. But anyway, we were given money and we brought them to Evanston and I began working with them. And I thought this would be I would just help the kids with the school business because I've worked so much in the schools and well, that's another story. All my experiences with working with kids who are very handicapped and very disabled and abused and all kinds of other things. I think a lot of it, a lot of what happens in Hope comes through the relationship that you have with the other person. And with Centauria, I got involved and I told her initially when we met, and I was scared to death. I had no experience working with, the people that were so impoverished and so on and so forth. I had no experience whatsoever. But I told her I would stick with her to the end. And I kept by that. And there were many.
She didn't believe you at first.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I didn't believe myself. And there were many times where I wanted to quit, where it was just absolutely overwhelming. And my husband and my son were very hopeful and they kept, keep going. And, it's been a very powerful, walk through life. There were times when she came through for me in ways that I never would have expected. She would give her life for me, and I've done so much for them. It's just been this give and take back and forth, and I think the give and take has really lifted both of us. And my joy now is that she is in a different place. She has 2 jobs. She's doing really, really well. She never finished high school. I kept encouraging her not to do that, but we did keep her kids in Evanston Township, Evanston, and the kids went to Evanston Township High School.
Yeah.
I sometimes paid the rent to keep them there. It's just the constant, it's just what you do. I did lots of things. But they did lots of things for me too. And, the second child is handicapped, cognitively impaired. She graduated from Evanston Township High School and she continued to be in a program after school, and now she's working. She's continued to work for Albertsons, and she works now where they live in Albertsons and involved in Special Olympics and so on and so forth. The first person in the family to graduate from high school, and she's handicapped.
You see, you're making my day. Like that story will take me through the whole day. That's so
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The next one, graduated, in, Evanston, having taken advanced placement classes. Got into, she didn't go, but she was accepted into Spelman College.
Wow.
She quit during COVID. We've been talking, and she kind of moved away from me, but she's moved back and calls me regularly, and we have conversations all the time. She's going back to college.
Yeah. Amazing.
The next child graduate, ADHD, never did his homework. People were on a case all the time, and they went back to Chicago at one point in time. the teachers were gonna fail him. I mean, this is a brilliant kid, this is a brilliant kid.
Yeah.
One time we had a conversation at dinner table and we were, I don't remember what, I think Tori was talking about one of her projects. We were talking about city-states.
Yeah.
And then he started talking about the Hammurabi, I mean, he was like fourth grade. He started talking about the Hammurabi Code, and then we ended up talking about all these, all these other things. I mean, it's just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And anyway, he is a basketball player, a fabulous basketball player, got a ride scholarship to a junior college, and now he's doing really, really well. One of the best players on the team, leadership capacity. In fact, the one time he got in trouble at school, this was in the junior high, he was in trouble for fighting. But they had a video of it and they suspended him, but what happened is he was friends with an autistic child and he defended the autistic child against somebody else who was picking on him. So they backed off from that, but anyway, he's a great kid. And they're looking at, he's looking to get a full ride at a college, finish up.
Wow.
That is so great.
So, and they call me on my birthday and say, I love you so much. And, you know, I call them all the time. I mean, it's just,
I think you're so right about the hope blooms so much easier in relationship. That's what I got from the night ministry, even though those relationships severed when I left, but it was just being in a relationship that allowed that hope to start.
and the other thing, other things that happened is after I retired, I became, an advocate for kids with learning with learning problems.
Fantastic.
And I worked with legal firms, and I was scared to death too, having to go in and do that.
I don't know if Betty can hear you. I just
yes.
wanted to say,
Oh,
oh, you
good.
can. All right, good. Then keep
So I
talking
was
where you
scared to
are.
death to do that and have
No,
to
no, no, I can-
testify and so on and so forth.
Good.
But something happened about my meeting those kids that made me really brave.
Mhm.
And I was like a tiger going in there.
Right.
And, you know, I did not, I'm not bragging, but I did not lose a case. Well, I lost one case, but I have to start the story. I'm not giving up on this. I'm not giving up. This child needed to be placed in, he needed residential placement because he had a lot of problems. So that was the only way he was gonna get treated. And they denied me a reevaluation. And so I went to the mother and I said, I will do this evaluation for just a little bit of money. And I talked to speech and language therapist to do it for a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And we came back and I did the evaluation, presented the case, and we won the case, and the kid, the young man got placed. So I think my having hope gave them hope that there were other answers. And, this sort of, it just ballooned into something more.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Anyway, I've got lots of experiences like that.
That's wonderful. Me too.
And JS, do you have any stories of hope you'd like to share?
One more. I know many of you know my husband has Alzheimer's and it's really, really, really difficult. And I get really discouraged at times, but I hold on to the little bits of time that I have with him that are really joyful. That's my hope.
That's beautiful.
And that makes the rest of it, that diminishes all the rest of it.
It sounded like JS was clearing her throat. Are you?
Were you trying to say something, JS?
Okay. Does anyone else have
How did it get to be 9:30?
Well, I guess I have one. My brother's daughter has made some mistakes in her life and wound up in a very very poor marriage and has 2 children. And she's just now decided to go back to school. And we thought it would be helpful if we were to subsidize her process of going to school. And so my brother basically is the one's closer to her, so he manages the whole process. And we've gone through several stages of help. The first, I think we shared this with you, remember, with, she thought that she had found a full ride to a online school called Grand Canyon College. And we,
Sounds fishy.
and she said, "This is wonderful, Dad. I don't have to pay any money." I said, "What?" I said, "Oh, sure." So my brother checked into us, and it turned out that yes, while you have matriculated, you don't have to pay any money, but you do afterwards. So he got her out of that into a program where she is going to a junior college in Colorado. They live in Lyman. Fortunately, they live out of a metropolitan area, so they could actually survive in their low income status. And so she's being subsidized by the state of Colorado because she wants to go back and be a teacher. And they need nurses and teachers, and they will pay for your with Pell Grants, I assume.
That's great.
They'll pay for your way through junior college. So she's working her way through junior
That's a
college
good way
and
to
then
do it.
graduate. So that was really kind of a fun thing that together we made our way through this. Well, then he called up 3 weeks ago and said, "Well, she's not managing her budget very well. She just, when money comes in, she spends it." As opposed to, well, you should, spend it on things you absolutely have to spend it on, and then see if there's anything left over to spend it. So my brother said, "Could you help out?" He said, "Oh, sure." We said we'd help out. And he said, "Well, would you pay for her internet connection?" I said, "Well, that's wonderful. It's a defined thing. We can pay for it. It's absolutely necessary." But I guess the thing getting us back to hope is that, we get so much out of this by being part of the solution, and then she has more hope because she has resources that she can call on that weren't there before. So it works both ways, I think,
Totally.
it's,
And she knows she's got somebody supporting her along the way.
That's
She's
right.
not in it
That's right.
on her own.
So we talked to her and, in order for us to pay for her internet connection, of course, we have to have her password and all this stuff so that so that the money can come out of our checking account directly. And there's no interaction with her and us and the internet company because it's gonna come directly out of our checking account. But this took 3 or 4 interactions that we had to have. And, I think that's always helpful because we have hope that, well, she's making progress.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And she has hope that she has somebody to support her. So it's kind of a nice thing to know that you actually can help someone at a I would call this extraordinarily modest level. I mean, it's, $91 a month and Winnetka's not really a whole big deal, but to her, it's a huge thing. So anyway, so that's my.
I think that kind of goes back to that first quote about, with his sleeves rolled up, trying to change the odds, right? Because it could be easy for someone to say, well, I guess she's just gonna have to work a job that isn't that great and hope that she can get by, but none of us want that for our family, but, making sure she has Wi-Fi, she can go to school.
Well, but her and her children,
Right.
because her kids
They
are
need
in
it for
school, they
school,
need
yeah.
it too.
Right,
So
and that's changing even more
So,
than
so
really.
it turns out that's a really critical thing to have a Wi-Fi connection today. Without that, you're really in trouble.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Thinking about hope, I think it's interesting. Tori quit school. She got a full ride at DePaul. Quit school because of COVID. It just wasn't working for her. She started out on her own. She started working at Walmart and then moved to Target. She was not making it all. I sent her money one time for a telephone bill, but she was just really struggling. She was so depressed and so on and so forth. So I think that struggle really helped her make the decision we talked and talked and talked, I listened, and then I think that struggle helped her realize she really needed to go back to school. And now you haven't talked to me much lately, she's talking to her mother, and she said, I've already applied to, I think she's trying to get in the University of Illinois.
But see, I love that you said she's even talking to her mother, because I think there's also like the parallel process, right, of like, when we can model that for someone else, like maybe now your niece will be able to say to her kids, like, okay, guys, we have to have a budget and we need to take care of these things, and then we can budget fund money or whatever, you know, that's our hope, right, that it's.
Yeah.
Ripple
Yeah, well, we all need good models,
Yeah.
you know, because that's where we're growing up, I think
And
I think that's really important.
That's what I struggle with so much in churches, because as you're talking about this family and, you know, your daughter and social work and whatever, we, as church people, have this desire, you know, but a lot of the ways that we're able to give is always without the relationship. It's going to serve food, and that at least gets a conversation, but it doesn't get a relationship started.
I think that's what Ellen was talking about when he wanted to do that hands-on project.
Really long
Yeah.
term.
He said, we're so good at giving money, but
Right.
we're not good at really getting down and doing
And
it.
it's not just money, I mean, we're also other ways, you know, we collect toiletries,
Right, but it's,
but none of that gives you the relationship, which
It's a
then
distance.
helps you
Yeah.
get to the hope section and helps you feel the real reward. And then the other thing that I always think about is the biggest determiner of your, your parents' achievement is the biggest determiner of where you will get in life, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of it has to do with your social circle. And we are so divided by our social and economic circles.
Right.
And so ever since I've been a pastor, I've been trying to figure out how do we develop some kind of program where there is cross, you know, like in Hastings, I was in a working class church, but it was a working class church where there weren't people really falling on terribly hard times. And they were one of the biggest givers in their small town because we had a nice endowment that we tithed from regularly. So they were always, in this small town, this small church was like the biggest giver in the community. But I always was looking for how do we get to the place where we're sharing our skills and our knowledge and, you know, our ability to give, like the way that you have done with this family, you know, the encouragement, you know.
I
this
wish
is
everybody
Problem solving.
had this opportunity. I mean, because I have been friend, aunt, mother, grandmother.
Right.
I mean, every financial advisor, I mean, I would give loans because
Right.
I
But-
said, do not go to this.
Oh, don't go to
Pay
currency.
whatever.
Oh, yeah, don't go,
You
yeah.
ask me for money and I'll give you money and you can pay back, and I'm not gonna give you any answer. But all kinds of things like that we don't think about.
My first job in Chicago was Women's Self-Employment Project, which doesn't exist anymore, but at the time it was a micro-lending, the first micro-lending
Right, so-
agency in Illinois, in the country. But they were trying to do a model that had worked in Pakistan here, and they had to tweak it a lot and try to like force the relationship portion, which was a given in the small villages that it had come from. Because relationship is part of like social pressure, the peer pressure, the support, we want you to do better so that we can do better. You know, you get the loan and then you have to pay it back before I can get a loan, was part of the way the Grameen Bank worked. And it didn't work as well here because there's all these other barriers like credit and whatever to getting to where you need to get finances. But like, that's a very interesting situation because it was talking about relationship and like you've had relationship and, you know, so I'm always trying to figure out how do we do this? And like the refugee program is a good effort, but because of the privacy requirements, because of, you know, that allows, you know, it usually ends up, involving like 5 people in the church heavily, but then the rest of the church doesn't get the benefit from that relationship. They get reports, but the reports are anonymous. And then the Family Promise was actually a great, you know, there was a lot of conversation going on there with people, but they weren't
Limited.
interested so much in us having the relationship ongoing. They were interested in us giving them showers and places to sleep. And, you know, I do think they benefit from just having conversations at the table over dinner with people, you know, but they say that like, if you are someone who is grown up in generational poverty, this is Ruby Payne, I'm sure do you know Ruby Payne too? There's a woman, a sociologist who writes about poverty. And she has this fascinating table that talks about different cultural differences that we don't see because we're all American, but they're absolutely there, that you'll see, they become revealed and you're like, oh, wow, this is where I am. I remember at the time I read it, I was dating someone in Hastings and he was from generational poverty and I am solidly middle class. And as I read through the list, I was like, oh, I'm here and he's there. I'm here and he's there. Like, it was very obvious that
Right.
very true. And so we don't always see the things like someone in generational poverty, their whole circle is gonna be people who are also in that same situation. And middle class, your circle tends to be middle class, you know?
I think
And then-
part of the problem also is that we are so segregated that they never see anything else. And I felt like, I wasn't too sure how this was going to go, but having those kids in my home regularly made a huge difference because they saw other things. They saw my son going on to college. I mean, they saw him grow and going to college and so on and
It's
so forth.
example.
And that became, because they had a relationship with him, that became their model.
Right.
So I think
And
that
it
that
maybe
was,
felt accessible, like I actually know this person, right?
yeah.
Yeah, not a movie.
It's not a movie,
Yeah.
and they could see a different way, and I could talk to Centauri about, okay, this is what the difference is. And you too, this is how the middle class thinks, you too can do this, and this is how it's
But you
done.
don't get there unless you have someone,
personal.
because at that
You have
same,
to have
that
the
same
relationship.
section,
And
we
trust.
had two women
Can
come.
can I jump in? As I'm listening to this, I always use Carol as my barometer because Carol is not me in a really, really huge way. And the discussion has been, because so much of it is Carol, has been about relationships and working with other people and finding commonalities and differences. And with me, everything starts internally. There are no relationships with others until I have my relationship with me, whether it's with regard to hope or peace. I have to have that internal clock set before I step out to do relationships. And neither approach is better than the other. They're all needed. But just to recognize and celebrate that we approach these things differently.
That's such a good point, the self-awareness, I think that's really required to have these meaningful relationships in a way that doesn't feel patronizing and prescriptive, but instead like, this is my experience and I want to share that with you, and what do you think and what do you want for yourself, right?
Right.
Thank you for sharing that.
So I'm wondering if some of these stories, if you look at them collectively, aren't there many points of light rather than one main path?
Oh, yes.
And I'm just wondering if one role the church can play is to help others have these experiences in many very different ways, because we all have our own backgrounds and
Right.
backstories.
What you're comfortable with.
And relationships, and they're all going to be different, I think. And I'm just thinking about, Tom Churchwell's thinking we ought to be a mental health institution. So in a way, religion is mental health, isn't it? It's a way to reduce your anxiety over life's path. There are many ways of reducing this, but maybe one of them is to work with others to have these experiences, but they're all varied and different. And I'm just wondering if somehow the church could recognize that the pathways are multiple and different, and find some way that we could use our record-keeping facilities, our digital world now, to recognize the differences that our congregation have as individuals and how they might be able to interact with others. So,
That's what, thank you.
cause I, there, it seems like that's what we're all talking about here.
Do you think it's the, what, there should be just a variety of different opportunities for people to engage in?
Right.
There should be, and we
That's
should
right.
share them with each other and listen to
But,
each other.
but we need to know them, so part of the
That's right.
challenge right now is I- over the years I've been involved, we've done a terrible job of having a little note card on, what's this person's real background, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and we kind of know it, but there ought to be a better way of knowing, your background.
Right.
And whatnot, and how you might be most effective in your interaction with other people.
We had a list, didn't we, one time? I remember having to write down and send that into the
Right, and
church.
that disappeared in
It was many,
somewhere.
many years
Yeah,
ago.
I don't-
Whole
I don't-
nother conversation. that's
Yeah.
worthwhile.
That's
This is
just
what we're
my,
talking about, starting with, thank you,
But-
Katie, what's
but
the
I-
sign on our lawn say, bringing people together, and thank you, JS, you heard, and I was feeling it too, what are we all talking about, hope,
Yeah.
it's connections,
Right.
talking to other people, it's gotta start with you, JS, create your own hope as you do, and then share it with others.
You can't give away something you don't have.
That's right. So why don't we just do more of this, like what we're doing right now, is we're connecting with each other, we're learning about each other, so we know what we can depend on each other for, and there's a lot.
I think we also need to talk with one another, you know.
Do you know what I mean?
It's gonna be interesting to hear what Katie had to say. It's interesting to hear what other people have to say, and I think that inspires you to do. Cause as I say, I did not want to do this. I was not at all inspired to do this.
Yeah.
But
Alan
I,
can be very persuasive.
actually, you know what it was? It was Marla Mothershed,
Oh,
his wife,
his wife.
that called me and said, Carol, I really wanna do this. And because my relationship with her, I
Right.
I
All
caved.
Yeah.
there you go.
And I said, yeah.
Certain people ask me to do things, I have no interest in costumes for the pageant, sorry, but Julie McConnell asked me, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm available.
Right.
When should I be there?
Right.
You know.
Well, thank you, JS, for the, making sure that we're keeping attention to the inner connection that we have with ourselves.